We're going to start our presentation, and I'm going to introduce the introducer, Mike McCarthy, who has given me the ideas for this half dozen speakers we've gotten from Brevard. Gave me the idea to have Ed Cottrell, gave me the idea for some other ones. I met these two gentlemen through Mike. So Mike was born in Jacksonville, Florida, and raised there. His father was in World War II, was in the Coast Guard, and his job was escorting ships from New York to Guadalcanal and back and forth, because there was U-boat activity all along the U.S. Atlantic coast. They sunk a lot in the Outer Banks and things like that. So Mike had a career in consulting and performance improvement. Still does have a career, because he still does that. And matter of fact, I asked him if I could use these consulting services and improve my performance, and he said, "Bob, we don't usually take people that need as much work as you do. I can talk to you, the people that do more remedial, but you're probably remedial." Mike went to the University of Florida and got his master's in counseling at Kent State. He's been 30 years in Brevard, as I mentioned earlier. His wife wrote the book, wrote the stories that the men and women told about World War II in the book that's for sale after this. And we're very pleased to have him, and I'm going to let Mike run the show and tell you about our speakers. So Mike, thank you very much.
I've been with this museum, and because my father was in World War II and my father-in-law was in World War II, we realized that we need to collect these stories. So my wife started using her smartphone to sit down with veterans and record their stories and then put them together in the book that she's got back there. The title comes from something her father, who was also Navy, sent home to his mother, a message saying, "Don't you worry about us, we shall come home victorious." And that's the name of the book. So it's all the stories of those people. We in Brevard, the Veterans History Museum, we're right in the center of town, next to the courthouse. We're free. We're open from 11 to 2 every day. If you want to organize a tour, contact me. I've given out some of my business cards. We'd be happy to have you. We are small but mighty. We have got some artifacts. We've got stuff. Our curator, Sergeant Major, retired Marine Corps Sergeant Major Bobby Kotlaski, used to be at the Patriots Point in Charleston. He's now our curator. We have got a vintage machine gun from World War I that's extremely rare. We've got a lot of rare artifacts there. But what I like is the stories. And as we interviewed these veterans, we had such stories. And for example, one of them we just had on our stage last week for Veterans Day. Merle Jean Hughes was a physical therapist in New Guinea. And she said in treating the men there, they would, in the Pacific in World War II, the Merle Jean is 102 also, by the way. She said that, of course, ice was in short supply out there in the tropics. But if there was a medical need for it, you got ice. So she said there was one guy in the ward that for medical reasons, they needed to put ice on his leg. She said he was the most popular guy in the ward because all the other guys brought their cans of beer up and put it next to his leg. So I just love the little stories about that. So we're in our museum. We love to come on up, have a tour, bring your grandchildren. It's a great way to learn history. They see a lot of things. We let them try on the uniforms. We've got a display about women in the military. We've had numerous speakers, women as well. Bob came, I believe, Bob, you came last November when I had my World War II history conference. I was so lucky. We had Alex Kershaw, who's had the Netflix series, and he's got the books out about D-Day. So we had Alex Kershaw speak one day about D-Day, and then the very next day, we had George, who was on the beach at D-Day. So we had the historian to report the big picture, and then the up-close and personal eyewitness to history there. So, let me...
Ja, Joe Steenkopper, I was born in Nashville, North Carolina in 1922. I'm 102 years old now, going on 103. I joined the Navy in 1941. I trained in North Virginia and got a ship. My first ship was Peter Charlie 477. It was like a destroyer. We hurt submarines. I got on that and went through the Panama Canal to Pearl Harbor and I circled the islands hunting for submarines. April come and the Battle of Midway started, so we went up there to try to find pilots the planes crashed. And so after Midway, we went back to Pearl Harbor, and so they go invade the Solomon Islands. So they sent us down to New Caledonia. That's the island about 300 miles south of Guadalcanal. So we were up there and patrolled Guadalcanal. We sunk 2 submarines up there, and one of them, the crew jumped over the side, but the sharks got them. We didn't capture none of them, and so we stayed there about 6 months. Went to New Guinea, and we patrolled that, and then I got orders to come back to the United States for a new ship. I got on the aircraft carrier, CVE 79, Omni Bay, USS Omni Bay. We started training and got our crew at Pearl Harbor. Then we went to the South Pacific. We invaded Admiral Islands, Pago, Paolo, and several more. And then we got in the battle. I went up in the Philippines with MacArthur. We took the 6th Army up there. They come from Admiralty and Hollandia, New Guinea. That's northern part of New Guinea. And we invaded Leyte. And then we got in that big sea battle over there. And we was in Taffy 2. There's 3 aircraft carriers, task force, Taffy 1, 2, and 3. So we got shelled off of Tama Island, off of Leyte Gulf, by the big battleship Yamato. And then they turned and run from us, and they sunk 5 of our ships. And then we got in Mindoro battle, there, invasion. And then we come back, our base was in the Seahawk Channel in the Admiralty Islands. And then we loaded up and we left to go to Luzon. And on the way up, we got off Luzon and the kamikazes attacked us and they dropped 2 bombs. The Japanese used a 16-inch battleship shell for bombs and put fins on the back of them. So one of them hit the hangar deck and exploded. The next one went in the engine room, knocked the water lines out. We didn't have no power or nothing. They said ban the ship, so I jumped over the side and swam. I left my life jacket down the crew quarters where I was at. And so another man had extras, and so he let me have it. And so about 5.5 hours, another ship picked us up, and it put me on a Minneapolis heavy cruiser. So we went up and bombarded Langate and Gulf. That's what we done.
And Joe, tell them what they told you about when you jumped over the side and what were you supposed to not do in the water?
You're supposed to not kick and trash the water, because the sharks will come after you if you do that. And they told us that in Guadalcanal for all them shippers got something.
So treading water for 5 hours without using his legs.
Yeah.
The Omni Bay you see here, it burned and burned and burned, but it didn't sink, and so another ship finally used gunfire to sink it so there wouldn't be a hazard to navigation. But there were, if you go on the Navy Times, you'll see some of the story. Joe got interviewed when his ship was located later. They've identified his ship's wreckage out there in the Pacific. and what was it? A group from Australia came and interviewed. Joe lives in the veterans home in Black Mountain, North Carolina, and they came in with a Zoom call from Australia to interview Joe since they found his ship. Joe is the only known survivor of the USS Amity Bay. And then a Japanese news agency showed up at the Black Mountain Veterans Home and also interviewed Joe. Anything you want to add, Joe, about your interviews?
Yeah, thank y'all for being here. I appreciate it.
Here is... Joe was a gunner's mate on those twin 40s, right? So he may have put a shot or two into that Japanese Betty that burned, and that's not the one that crashed on his ship, so they had to abandon ship, but it crashed into the sea nearby. So here's Joe in our museum, where we've got a display, another rare display. We've got a samurai sword surrendered to an American captain by a Japanese submarine commander who heard about the surrender and surfaced in Hiroshima Bay and surrendered and presented the sword, and that person's family has given it to the museum, so we've got it there. And then a year or two ago, our mayor, come on down to Brevard, because our mayor, Captain Maureen Kopoloff, was a Navy captain, and so she declared a certain day when we reopened the museum, Joe Cooper Day. So here's Joe having a good time with the mayor, Kopoloff, and she's cutting up with him. And again, we've got Joe's story in the book that you can pick up back here, and Joe will be happy to sign his chapter. So Joe, anything else you want to add?
That's all.
That's all. Okay. Joe also went into the Korean War, and he was on some of those famous battle, some of those hills. I'm blanking out now as to which one it was, but he was with he went after World War II. He joined the Army, and so he served in Korea on some of those. He was in the recon unit and came under fire in Korea as well. So he's a double dipper, as we used to say. Okay, now we want to switch over to George Sarros on the other side of the world, in the Atlantic. George was a World War II motor machinist on LST, landing ship tank, and he was part of the landings on D-Day. And here's a picture of George with his shipmates, and the arrow points to him, and we've blown that up. But a little known story, some of you have been to Slapton Sands, I certainly didn't know about it, never heard of this story. George was a part of a practice for D-Day in April on Slapton Sands, and it was called Exercise Tiger. So George, you want to start and tell them about Exercise Tiger?
Yeah. Get the microphone in your hand. The other mic.
Oh.
First of all, I'd just like to thank the club and all your wonderful
Speak a little louder,
people
Joe.
to allow me to come in and speak a little bit about my experience in the Navy.
Just have to speak a little louder.
Okay.
Would you like a handheld one?
If the Lord,
Speak close. Yeah, like that.
I joined the Navy in April 17th, 1942. I just turned 18 years old, and I got a wonderful letter from the government and said that they need you in the service. The next thing I know, I was on a train going to Farragut, Idaho for basic training in the Navy.
A little louder.
I was there about 10 weeks. Then I got orders to return and go to New Orleans. When I arrived in New Orleans, I picked up a brand new ship that was built in Seneca, Illinois, and came down the Mississippi River. It was a skeleton crew at that time, but when I got on, There was 150 of us aboard the ship. I was assigned to work in the engine room. And I worked with 3 of my fellows down in the engine room. After we had an excursion in the boat, in the sea, we were given orders to load up, and we were to sail all the way up to Newfoundland and receive a no crew, a convoy. The LST was about 350 feet long, 40 feet wide. The bow doors open, and the ramp would go down. And when you land on the beach, the LST was a flat bottom road. It was only made out of mail. Yeah. So we got orders to sail, and we sailed all the way across from Florida all the way up to New York, where we loaded up with ammunition. Our ship was full of ammunition. On the tank deck, you could put maybe 20, 30 tanks there. So we got up to Newfoundland, and then we got a crew, and then we sailed east on the Atlantic Ocean, and we landed in England. I had just turned 19 years old. While we were there, we got orders that we were supposed to have 8 LSTs were to sail to Slapton Sands. Churchill removed all the people that lived in Slapton Sands. There was only about 300 people there. So we loaded up with ammunition, troops, tanks, and there was about 8 of our LSTs. I was on LST 515, and my Captain Doyle was the captain of LST 515, which I was on. It was the flagship. So we sailed about 11 o'clock at night. I was working in the engine room, and then when I got through in the engine room off the court, I went back to get in my sack to go to bed, and then general quarters was sounded. So I ran up to quarterboard, and I was on a 40 millimeter gun. There was 40 millimeters on the bow, one on the starboard side, one on the port side, and then one on the back, on the tail end of it. So there were 3 of us in it. We had one that had the earphones on, and then one would load the gun, and the other one would shoot the gun and then load it. So while we were up at our gun, all of a sudden we looked out, and LST 289 was torpedoed. And then we waited a few more seconds. About a minute later, LST 407 was torpedoed. And then another few more minutes, another LST, I can't remember the name of it, was torpedoed. So the commander that was on our ship, he was in charge of these 8 LSTs, and he told the rest of the captains on the other LSTs that they were supposed to hit the beach. Captain Doyle got a hold of the commander and said to him, no, LST 515 was going to go pick up survivors. So we started heading for the boat where they were torpedoed. And then on the radar, we got word that a German E-boat, which comparable to our PT boats. It was in our reach, about a mile away and a half from us. And the captain said to hold your fire, don't fire. And then when it got close to maybe a block and a half or 2 blocks, we got orders to shoot. And we shot all the time. I don't know whether we hit him or not. It was dark, the water was 40 degrees cold. Guys were screaming, yelling for help. And we said, so we got as close as we could. Then we opened the bow door, lowered the ramp, and lowered our boat, Higgins' boat, with a few of our boys that are in it. And they were down trying to pick up survivors and putting them on. I remember at the gun where I was with my buddies there, guys were screaming and yelling help, and we told them, hang on, mate, we're going to pick you up, we're going to pick you up. So we lasted there for hours. Guys were screaming. Two of the LSTs sunk. LST 289 didn't completely sink, but we lost over 500 military and Navy. And I remember we had one soldier on the table for us. We were trying to revive him, and we couldn't revive him. So the lieutenant came over and says, "You've got to go start picking up dog tags." And then our ship sailed out there for hours picking up survivors. And I remember one of my shipmates got down on a rope and went down to pick up one of them. And as he picked him up, he said he was gone. So then we just kept picking up as many as we could. We saved about 90 of them that we picked up on our ship. And then we sailed from there. We went to the closest town to a hospital. So we lost quite a few fellas, yeah. And we lost all our military tanks. What happened was, when the explosion hit the LSTs, the Army guys had the belts around their waist. And what happened when they threw them over the sea, they were in the water, they were knocked out. And they didn't have a chance. If they'd had them like we had, we were safe for that. So we stayed out there till 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. We were all bushed to death. And that was about it. And then E-Day was on LSC 515, and we were out
Off the beach?
Yeah, we were off the beach. There was two just wagons shooting at the beach and everything, and then there was a transport ship right over the side, and they had the ladder down, and the infantry guys were climbing down there, and they were getting in the small boats and waiting for orders to them. So finally we got the word to heat the beach. So at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we hit Normandy, we hit that beach, and then we unloaded our ship. Before we landed, a German fighter plane came down to strafe us, and before we knew it, one of our P-47s got on his tail and got him out, yeah. So we all landed and unloaded, and we did there. LST 515 made 65 trips across the English Channel to France, picking up survivors, taking ammunition, taking prisoners, and that. Captain Doyle was never court-martialed for what he went against orders. But that's about what, and I stayed there. The ship brought me back to America. The ship that brought me there and that ship took me back, we never got a scratch. But we had a bunch of great guys, and we had a great general, yeah. Anyway, I landed in Norfolk. My brother was in a hospital over there. He was in the Coast Guard. And I got to visit with him. In order to get out of the service, you had to have 85 points. I didn't have 85 points. So from Norfolk, I went all the way to Cuba. We had a Marine base down there. So I was down there for about 2 or 3 months, and then they came back to St. Charles. And I got off the ship and got on the train and went to Great Lakes and got discharged. And when I got ready to discharge, they handed me $300. That's quite a job. anyway, it was a pleasure to serve. And I also want to thank the veterans that are here today, too. I thank you for your love and your kindness and the support that you give the veterans. Thank you, folks.
You can tell your trip back. But wait, there's more. In June 2022, George traveled back to Normandy, accompanied by his friend Tom Bugala, who's one of our board members at our museum. Tom's an Air Force veteran. So they flew to Amsterdam and they visited. And where was this cemetery? Was this the one in Normandy, George?
Yeah,
or
Normandy.
in Normandy? He was able to pose with some of the French citizens when they went back to Normandy in this picture. The French of Normandy, at least, are grateful to Americans because they had the stories handed down by their grandparents about these American GIs who died to free them up. The rest of France might not be so grateful. So they've got even the little children dressed up in American GI uniforms to welcome our GIs back, such as George. And then in December 7th, 2022, George was nominated and received the French Legion of Honor, and the French Consul General from Atlanta came up to pin the medal on George, and we have the medal right here. French Consul General Dejoncaire. I was a terrible French student, but I practiced that a dozen times to say her name correctly. And then, of course, with the French custom of a kiss on each cheek, George was the beneficiary of that. And then Consul General Dejoncaire explained to us all that now George is officially a Knight of the French Republic, and so he's entitled to be addressed as Sir George. He traveled back to Normandy in 2023. There's a documentary on NBC called In the Company of Heroes that was shown this past summer. I've got some little sheets of paper printed out with these URLs. If anybody's interested, on the back table, you can look it up. And it's about a half an hour, but George was featured in that 30-minute documentary that showed some of the various veterans going back to Normandy. And again, you can see all the French citizens lined up in Normandy to honor our veterans. And George said they were just yelling and screaming and wanted autographs. And of course, bringing out all the children. Here's this little toddler applauding for our guys. And this is George's wife, who is no longer with us, Enrica Sarros. And again, his story and most of these pictures are in the book back there.